Hey guys, welcome back. So I hope you had a great Ash Wednesday. I hope that the goals you kept and the promises that you keep between you and the Father, that I hope you strive to continue them and strive to go after them. And if you're anything like me, anything like, because we are human and we make mistakes, I hope if like I slipped up, we slipped up this week, and I just hope that you continue to keep going, and then you continue to keep striving for that. So no matter what, keep going, because failure is not a person, failure is an event. So just remember that you're not a failure, even though you didn't keep your promises. So continue to strive for that, because that's what Lent is all about. Lent is about giving the effort that God is asking, and as long as you give effort every single day leading up to Easter, then that's all He ever wanted. So we're going into the readings, and we'll talk about the gospel, and like we always do, we break it down, and it's always a good story, always. And then the second reading is what I wanted to get to in a little bit. So this is called Transfiguration Sunday, and we'll go into it. So, and this is Mark chapter 9, verse 2 through 10. So, and after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John, and led them up a high mountain, apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his garments became glistening, intensely white, as no fuller on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, and they were talking to Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is well that we are here. Let us make 3 booths, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." For he did not know what to say, for they were exceedingly afraid. And a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud. "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." And suddenly looking around, they no longer saw anyone with them, but Jesus only. And as they were coming down the mountain, he charged them to tell no one what they had seen, until the Son of Man should have risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what the rising from the dead meant. So like we said, this is Transfiguration Sunday. And so we'll break it down like always, right? So here we go. So after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John, and led them on a high mountain apart by themselves. So if you recall from last Sunday, Jesus was in the time of period of solitude, right? A period of temptation, his encounter with the devil. Remember that, for 40 days and 40 nights. So that was a period of solitude, and now we're in a period right here on this mountain of glorification, and we'll see that coming up. And so why Peter, James, and John? I think these were the closest that he were. These were his 3 closest friends out of the group of his disciples. So that's why these 3 were there specifically. When you have a group of friends, right? You're close to a specific few, and the others you are kind of close, but not as close as you are to certain people. And so that's why he took them apart from this mountain, apart from the group. He took them up on this mountain, and he was transfigured before them, and his garments became glistening, intensely white, as no full on earth could bleach them. And so what does transfigured mean? Transfigured means transformed, kind of what they were they're used to seeing, but something completely different. So Jesus would probably, I would imagine his sandals, right, and his long flowing hair and a brown cloak, and then boom, he had this whole white cloak on, just pure white, And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, and they were talking to Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is well that we are here. Let us make 3 booths, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." For he did not know what to say, for they were exceedingly afraid, right? So why Moses and Elijah, right? It couldn't have been Isaiah, couldn't have been Jonah, couldn't have been Abraham, but why these 2? Out of all the prophets in the Old Testament, like David, anything like that, why these 2? Why Moses and Elijah? I think there's a reason behind that. If you recall Moses, right, his encounter with God, and that was the encounter in the with the burning bush, right? God calling to Moses to ask what he for him to do, and that was on Mount Horeb, I believe, and Elijah. And if you recall Elijah hearing that still little voice, that he experienced God on a mountain. I think the same mountain as Moses did. I think. Correct me, maybe. But here, and if you recall also, the biggest thing that Moses did was the Ten Commandments, kind of this law. So we can kind of say he's a lawgiver, right? And Elijah, probably one of the greatest prophets ever in the Bible. We always hear about him. So we can kind of label him as a prophet. And I've written here, just little figures, Moses, law, and there's Jesus in the middle, and Elijah, prophet. And so why these two? And here's a reason why. Because Jesus is the fulfillment, right? The fulfillment of law and prophet. And that's why these two are appearing with him on this mountain, is that Jesus is the fulfillment of law and prophet. And that's why these two are here. And so what is all this? Okay, well, we can continue. And then, and a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud. This is my beloved son. Listen to him. And suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone with them, but Jesus only. So, what was the big picture? And I think that they're all experiencing God's presence on this mountain. And remember, like we said, we recall Moses experienced God on a mountain with the burning bush. Elijah experienced a small, still voice on a mountain. And Peter, James, and John are experiencing Jesus. And they experience God, that cloud over them, saying, this is my beloved son, listen to him. They experience God on this mountain. And Jesus is in the middle. And he's the fulfillment of these. So, and of course, they come down the mountain, and then he charged them not to tell anything they had seen until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. And they're pondering this question, well, what does rising from the dead mean? I'm sure they know what that means, but what does he mean by that? So we can kind of see that they're all experiencing God, right? They're experiencing God on this mountain, right? So we can say that Jesus equals the presence of God, right? Hold on, let me write it out for you. Sorry. We can say that Jesus is the presence of God. Jesus is the presence of God. So, of course, and Jesus is also the Son of God, right? So Jesus is the presence of God here on earth, right? That's when we go to church, we know who God is, but who do we see as soon as we walk in church, right? We see Jesus on the cross, and we see that, and he resembles mercy and his grace of his Father, right? And the humbleness and kindness of his Father. As soon as we walk into church, that's who we see, Jesus. So we say that Jesus is the presence of God here on earth. And that's what James, John, and Peter saw. They saw that Jesus is the presence of God, and we're experiencing this right here, right? And that's what happens when we go to church. We experience God with Jesus there. Or we experience Jesus with God there. And that's what's happening on this mountain. And that's what happened to Moses and Elijah. They experienced God. And so the question is, and I have it here in my book, give me 1 second. The question is, I think I wrote it to myself, is do we recognize that Jesus is the presence of God here on earth? And if we do recognize that, what can we do to listen to him? Because that's what God is asking. That's what God asked. That's what God told James, John, and Peter is, this is my beloved son. Listen to him. And so the question for us this Lent, or this week, and as we go throughout Lent, is that do we recognize that the things that we are doing for Lent, do we recognize that this is what God is asking of us, and when we go to church, do we recognize that when we see the Eucharist, we see the communion, right? Once we do communion, the communion of saints is around us. Once we are receiving communion, do we recognize that we're in the presence of God, and do we understand his mercy, and do we understand his grace, that this is why all the things we do is what we do it for a reason, and do we recognize that? And and also the question is, are we willing to listen to God for what he's asking us to do? He's calling us to come out of the boat and calling us to deep waters, and he's calling us to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that's why we set these goals for us this Lent, is to become a better person and to become the person that he wants us to become, right? But we know with the human condition, we get in the way of that ourselves. So that's my biggest question for you guys is, do you guys recognize that you are in the presence of God? at church and everywhere you are? Do you recognize that Jesus is the Son of God and Jesus is the presence of God here on earth? And if you recognize that, and hopefully, we all do, are we willing to listen to Jesus, and are we willing to give up the things that He wants us to give up? Just like in the first reading, God asked Abraham to give up his son on a mountain, and God said, "Wait, no, don't do it. I see how devoted you are, and I see how loyal you are to me, and for that I will bless you abundantly." That kind of example. I'm not saying God's gonna ask you to kill somebody. No, but it was just a test of faith, and God saw Abraham's loyalty. But I think it's just an example in there, the most extreme example. But God is asking, are you willing to give up something, right? And the question becomes, if God can give up His only Son for us, imagine what He will give us. Imagine what He can give us, like, more, right? If He gave up His Son, imagine what He can give up, right? He can give up a lot, everything, if He give up His Son for us. And that's what the second reading is about. Let me find. See right here. I lost it. But it's like, if God is for us, then who can be against us, right? And I have it here. Let me pull it up so I can read it to you guys, because that's the biggest thing here. Right here. Okay, so it says in Romans, if God is for us, who can be against us? He did not spare His own Son, but handed Him over for us all. How will He not also give us everything else along with Him? I think Paul says it great there in the book of Romans that, if God is for us, who can be against us? And if He gave up His only Son, imagine what else He could give us. And that's eternal life. So that's all I have for this week, guys. And I will see you next week. And just remember, continue to strive for the goals. Continue to become the person that God is calling you to be. And it's not an easy road. Lent is not easy. So just continue to be the best person you can be, guys. And I'll see y'all next week.